Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with a final diagnosis on the Peter Rassenti Nirvana. Now this knife is not to be confused with the Spyderco Nirvana. That knife has become very popular recently. In fact, I owned one. I bought that knife from the original designer, Peter Rassenti. Peter Rassenti is a custom knife maker out of Canada. He has a very active Instagram page. Go and check him out at Peter Rassenti. And he is a very popular knife maker. He's well known primarily for a single design philosophy, and that is the integral titanium handle. If you'll notice here that the handle is one piece of solid titanium. Just one piece of hardware, the pivot, and then the clip, but one piece of beautifully milled and beautifully contoured titanium. He hand makes all of his knives in his shop, and he's very approachable. He is very active, like I said, on Instagram, and you can message him and ask him questions. You can put comments and he'll reply to them, and you can buy his knives from his Instagram often. That's how I came across this knife. I originally owned the Spyderco Nirvana. I purchased it from Mr. Rassenti, and I loved the knife. You can check out my original review. That was actually the first YouTube video that I ever did. And then I had it reground by Josh over at Razor Edge Knives. And that was a really nice knife. It had a full flat grind. It sliced really nicely. I actually made a comparison video with that reground blade, comparing it to this very knife. In the end, I think that knife was maybe the better slicer because of the regrind and the amazing sharpness and the S90V. But this knife truly encompasses all the things that I'm looking for in a pocket knife. Whether you want to call it an EDC knife or whatever, but I like to carry a knife for whatever reason. I just enjoy it as a tool, and it's something that I use fairly frequently in my everyday life. And so in terms of a functional piece of art, I think that this is the perfect expression of that. This allows me to have an excellent tool at hand all the time, but also something beautiful to look at that's understated, non-threatening to many, and still just very useful. So as we do with all of these reviews, let's talk about this thing anatomically. Let's get the objective section out of the way before we get into the subjective, because there is a lot of subjective here and all of it is really good. So in terms of its components, we've got a 3.75 inch blade done in CPM 154. This is not 154 cm. This is done at about 60 Rockwell per Mr. Rassenti. It's interesting to me that he chose to use this steel. This is a good steel. It is a super steel. If you could consider it in the league of S30V, maybe S35VN, maybe it's better than any of the air hardened steels in terms of its grain structure and its capabilities as a cutting steel and as a corrosion resistant steel. It's got about 14% chromium, and it doesn't rust very easily. It has very good stainless properties. Now, the way that he has designed this blade is just amazing. You can see the reflective part and a non-reflective part. So the flats are a mirrored stonewash. I'm going to get really up close on this here. See if it'll focus. Hold on a second. There it is. Okay. So there is a mirror stonewash on the flats. You're going to see how I'm propping my camera, really my phone here. And then on the primary grind, it's a heavy stonewash, non-reflective hollow grind. That's also seen on the top swedge here, also on the spine of the blade, where you can see those swedges coming out to a really fine tip. Here you can kind of appreciate the differences in the mirror and the heavy stonewash finish. And then I've had my good friend put a mirror edge, wicked edge on this guy. Just a spectacularly even, sharp, incredible edge. We went about 17 degrees per side, a very usable, but also very sharp edge. So I wanted to have that just from a design standpoint, because I get the mirror effect on the blade and then also on the flats, and I enjoy that contrast. It's just cool to look at. The knife slices really well. As I mentioned in the comparison video, the real benefit of this knife being the custom is that it is hollow ground. Now he hand grinds these blades, of course, full custom knife here. And it's an awesome, awesome hollow grind that takes the knife to very, very thin behind the edge. That shot is always somewhat difficult to really do right. Just very thin behind the edge. You can see sometimes here that it's a fairly sharp angle there right at the top, that it's aggressively hollowed right there. Trying to focus on it. But very good slicer, also pretty thick blade stock, so it really does, you can do a little bit heavier cutting with it. You can push through cardboard with ease. You have some nice jimping up here on the top. It's very functional. It grips your finger. And then you have, maybe you could call this a little thumb groove up here for a little bit more pressured and controlled cuts. Reminds me of the Sebenza 25 and the Inkosi. They have this little notch here. I think this one fits more in line with the thumb ramp, the thumb hole divot, than the Sebenzas do, but it does remind me of that. He has the spider hole opening here. Now that's one of his designs as well. Spyderco just saw an opening there and just perfectly copied the design philosophy there. As you can see, he uses that on his knives here. And to be honest, that is probably my favorite opening mechanism of all. I think that everyone can agree that flippers are great. They're really easy to open. They're very reliable. Kind of keeps your hand away from the blade as it's deploying. It's a little bit maybe safer in some ways, but what I enjoy is the Spidey flick. So I just grab the knife like this, put my middle finger in there and flick it open. And I just really enjoy doing that. It takes a little bit more dexterity. It's like a little muscle memory thing that I really enjoy doing. So, and this knife does it perfectly. It just flies open and then close. So speaking of which, let's talk about why it does that, and that's because of this pivot. So externally, the pivot has, let me get the 0392 out of here. Externally, the pivot has an interesting piece of anodized hardware. He said that this is titanium. This is a fairly simple pivot for him. He'll often do collars of G10. He'll do zirconium, Timascus, other exotic things. But a lot of his pivots look similar to this in the sense that it's sort of this three-pronged external piece and it's finished in a certain way. This one, he said, was anodized and then satin finished. And what I see there is like a dark gray, maybe a blue color to that. I'm trying to get it in the light there. It's an interesting color, and it's cool that it's on the inside of the Torx bit as well. He then satin finished the actual metal part of it. So it's really, really pretty. It's nice. Now inside we've got the knife running on bearings. They're GTC bearings. Those are bearings designed by Gustavo Cecchini out of Brazil. They're 440C stainless steel bearings in a stainless steel washer sort of cage thing. A lot like the 0392. And this thing is ridiculously smooth. I love it, and that's a production knife right here. This custom knife comes with those bearings. Gus Cecchini uses those in his knives too, and those are some spectacular blades, GTC knives. You should check them out if you don't. But this knife runs on that, and they're just incredibly smooth. Just opens like a dream, and then just falls shut. I'm being gentle here, but if I really just give it one little flick, it closes right down. I don't have to put any effort into that. it's really a balance of a few things. So it's not just the pivot that's working there. The detent is perfectly tuned. The lock bar tension is perfectly tuned. And there's absolutely no lock stick. So this is titanium on steel, just like we saw in the Spyderco Nirvana. Now my Nirvana had relentless lock stick. This one has none. It never had any. It has not for a second. It's just buttery smooth between the blade and the frame. It is very solid lockup. Very, very, very solid lockup. No blade play in any direction whatsoever. I'll wipe my fingerprints off for this video here. And it's just an incredible, incredible thing. Now, the Spyderco Nirvana was a very solid feeling knife. I think Nick Shabazz commented on the fact of how solid it felt to him, maybe the most solid flipper. Now imagine that it's got a better lockup, a smoother lockup, and it's just a little bit different here. Now, we can talk now about the sort of the best part of this knife and the really special part of this knife, and that's the handle. So I already mentioned that Peter Rassenti is well known for doing integral knives with this one-piece titanium handle, but he's got a fairly set way that he does his handles. He recently revised his Nirvana design to the Nirvana 2.0. There were some minor changes here and there to the basic shape. This is a total departure from that as well. This is a Nirvana 2.0, essentially. At birth it was, but it's been changed and modified. He's calling this the Coke bottle frame. I want to just show you, sort of in the coronal view here, what the knife looks like and the curvatures that are going on the scale. So you can see that it's fairly flat here, and then it kind of swells up, and then it comes back and it swells up again. And it's a very sort of ergonomic, maybe bionic sort of shape. It's very cool. I showed this knife to somebody and they said, man, that looks like an alien knife or an alien tool or something. And I kind of get that because it really does look very futuristic and very sleek, very minimalist in that sort of futuristic way. So on this particular edition, he has hand contoured this frame to have these awesome ergonomic curvatures. He's also done the chamfering up here a bit differently so that it accentuates that curvature out there. Normally there's a thumb sort of divot at this point in the knife and the rest of it remains flat, but this one has that interesting contouring. And he carries it over to the lock side as well. That meant he had to modify his clip though. So his pocket clip is a nice milled piece of titanium, but he has had to bend it and mold it in the way that it would meet flush with this part of the frame, as well as sit on this sort of posterior curvature here. I'm going to try to get that to focus right there. We'll see if it will. No, not really. So you see how this frame swells up right here. Okay, I got it. There it is. And flares out at the tail there. So he had to curve it to that as well. It's not just straight. And his normal knives are straight right there, so he had to change it up. So why don't we go ahead, since we're looking at the clip there, and take in some of the details here really, really close up. Just look for a second at the different layers of finishing that are going on in this knife. Just the different sort of things that have been done to make this knife look the way that it looks. The different finishes on the clip, on the frame, on the pivot, on the blade itself. Just all really different, yet all unified in a certain way. So the frame itself is one piece of titanium that has been, it was initially sandblasted. It gave it that sort of dark color. Then it was stonewashed, and then maybe it was polished, and then last it was given a texture. And maybe I'll capture it in the light there. Maybe it was an acid wash or some kind of egg shelling or orange peeling technique. but it's very mild and it's very subtle, but it results in a texture on the surface of this knife that is very lifelike. I don't know how to describe it. It's carried onto the clip. It's a little bit more accentuated on the clip. It's a bright clip with a bit of a heavier sort of eggshelling done there. Same kind of screw hardware there, very robust screws, strong. Very simple, so you only see 3 screws here. There's only 1 screw on this side. Interestingly, he does include a solid piece of steel right here as the stop pin. And that is sort of an interesting design choice to me. I don't think that that's necessarily needed on this knife. He would design it out if he wanted to, but I think he leaves that there as almost like a beauty mark of sorts. You know that it's steel that's going on in here. You know that it's just a little bit stronger. It's done on purpose, but it's also finished with the rest of the knife. So if you take a good look at it, this stop pin, although it's stainless steel, sits flush with the frame. There's no way to feel anything there. In fact, it's even milled with the frame. You can see that a little corner there has been cut off. On his other knives, where he has these sort of patterns that go through this, I think the Paisan video that I had showed that pretty well, but he'll even do the designs through this piece of steel here, and it does carry over to the other side. So you know that it's a solid piece acting as your stop pin right there. So this knife, in terms of its components, is just fantastic. The finishing is out of control. The handle is beautiful and so nice to hold. It's just smooth, and it's got that interesting texture that makes you just want to hold on to it. Very, very, very cool. The blade, perfect in size for me. I like between about a 3.25 and 3.75. This is on the longer end of what I should carry around, but it works so well. It's a very functional blade shape, very strong blade, and it works nicely, and that hollow grind is perfect. In terms of carrying the knife, the clip is not quite perfect in terms of function. It really looks better than it works. It does look awesome. Did I mention also that the clip, as it is sitting, functions as the over travel stop as well. So if I try to extend this, it's not going to go past the clip right there. Very cool, and it doesn't rest on the lock bar, it rests on the frame, so it's not putting any extra tension on that as well. So very interesting and intelligent engineering and design choices going on there. You can see it's resting on the frame. With back to carrying it. So I wear scrubs every day, so it's convenient for me. This will slide on and off of scrubs pretty well because it's thin here, but in my thicker jeans pockets, it's harder to get the fabric into that small space. That's a combination of the fact that this clip is resting on the sort of downward slope part of that, and it makes the opening angle a little bit smaller because that's ramped up on the frame there. If it was flat, it might work better. There's not a whole lot of room here, so you can't put it on the thickest pants or pockets that you have, but it works for me. And so my final diagnosis on this knife is that it's perfection. This is the perfect knife for me. It's so perfect that I bought it, even at its exorbitant price of about $1,300. Now, he has some models that sell for $3,000 to $5,000 or more that are really, really fancy, made with incredible materials, Damascus, Damas steel, higher-end steels, higher-end clip materials, pivot finishes, all these kinds of insane things. So definitely go check out his work and see what he's made, but he does offer some sort of lower cost options. I ended up selling my Spyderco Nirvana and my Hinderer Fatty Warncliffe in order to afford this knife, and it's well worth it. I'm not sad to see those knives go when this is what replaces it. It's absolute perfection. If you don't have one in your collection and you can afford it, I would highly recommend it. If you have 3 to 7 Spydercos you're not liking, sell them and get this knife. So check him out on Instagram at Peter Rassenti. Check me out on Instagram at Dr. Frunkey. Click like and subscribe to my videos. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I absolutely love this knife, the Peter Rassenti Nirvana. As always, guys, this is Dr. Frunkey saying take care.